Let's just get the recording going.
Welcome to what we actually billed as a 10th anniversary celebration of the Journal for the Study of Spirituality, JSS for short. For those of you who don't know, the journal is jointly owned by INSS and the publisher Taylor and Francis. As the journal approached its 10th year of publication, we envisaged, by way of a celebration, a drinks reception, which we were going to have before the conference dinner. And that, as most of you know, was to have been in the UK in May last year at York St John University. Our publisher actually gave BAS, as it then was, the British Association for the Study of Spirituality, which has since become INSS, a small contribution to a pre-dinner drinks for everybody. And we were then to have had hot off the press copies of issue 10.1, the 10th anniversary issue of the journal, on display, together with two copies, the two issues that have been published every year since then. Our managing editor was to have said a few congratulatory words, and I thought that all I was going to have to do would be to thank all of those who've helped to make the journal what it is today, and that is a lot of people, and propose a toast to its future, and then just say cheers and lead everybody into dinner. Well, unfortunately, as we know, 2020 didn't quite go as planned. And so JSS is now well into its 11th year of publishing. In fact, 11.1 should have turned up on your doormat recently if you've paid your dues to INSS, and it's now in its zero plastic reincarnation. You can let me know what you think about it at some later date. Besides that, the other change of plan was that our lovely managing editor has just gone on maternity leave, and so she's very much occupied elsewhere today. And then, for better or worse, the purchase of drinks has morphed into the purchase of Zoom licenses. And then, from my point of view, what was the worst of the whole thing was that my colleagues told me that I can't just say cheers and then head off to lunch, but I need to actually say something about the journal. So I will do that in a minute, but as a prelude to what for me will be one of the greatest pleasures of this online event, and that is actually meeting members of the journal's editorial board who are participating in this conference. Editorial board colleagues are the people who keep JSS going and uphold its quality standards. And without their time and expertise that they give so generously and freely to the reviewing process, to giving constructive criticism to authors and invaluable advice to me, JSS definitely wouldn't be what it is today. But despite much correspondence between us, today will actually be the first time that I've met some of these colleagues, and I really look forward to being able to invite them shortly to introduce themselves to us all. Unfortunately, I don't think there will be time in this session to go much beyond introductions, but we have timetabled another session tomorrow afternoon when you're welcome to come and engage in conversation about the journal with me and some of our board members, including North American colleagues like David Hodge, who is our new designated North America editor, and for whom I think it's probably the middle of the night, which is why he's not here with us right this minute. I don't intend to say a great deal about the journal itself, because you can read the full JSS story, as it were, on the INSS website, and also on the Taylor and Francis homepage for the journal. You can find all sorts of metrics, including detailed information about most downloaded, most cited articles, and so on. But I think in celebrating the 10th anniversary of JSS, albeit as it passes its 11th, it's perhaps worth recalling the journal's origins and just some of the twists and turns of the journey to date, which not all of you will know about, but it has been an interesting journey. For me, it began at breakfast at an adult education conference in Canada in 2007, when I mentioned an embryonic idea I had for an interdisciplinary, interprofessional journal that might bring together work on spirituality, which was beginning to emerge in all sorts of different disciplines and professional contexts, many of which just didn't speak literally to one another. And one of the people at that breakfast table was Peter Jarvis. He edited the International Journal of Lifelong Education for more than 30 years. He was an adult educator through and through, and I have taken my cue as an editor from him because he always gave everybody every opportunity that he possibly could to develop their own work. So I owe a huge debt of gratitude to him, partly because he was one of the people who encouraged me to write about spirituality at a time when not a lot of people were. There wasn't much of a conversation around it. Well, his advice was simply, great idea, make it happen. Simple. But with that advice ringing in my ears, I went to another conference just a few weeks later back here in the UK, which was convened by Margaret Holloway and the then interdisciplinary spirituality group at the University of Hull. And this is the conference to which Julian referred this morning at Ravenscar, a little hotel out on the North Yorkshire coast. It was quite a small event, but the ripples that have extended from that have actually brought us here in many ways, because it was at that event that the conversations about developing BAS and JSS began to take root. And at that point, I should say, and the rest, as they say, is history. But as most of us know, especially those who were involved in the early days, the path of history doesn't always run smoothly. So a small ad hoc group of us decided to get together to form what subsequently became BAS. And we also pulled together a research proposal, which we took to a few well-known publishers in 2008. It actually had the long-winded title, International Journal for the Interdisciplinary Study of Spirituality. It's probably no wonder that didn't get off the ground. But despite the title, several publishers actually made positive noises about the proposal itself, but the message was that the market wouldn't sustain such a journal. And I'll just quote some feedback from some of the reviewers. One was, cross or interdisciplinary appeal doesn't lend itself to widespread adoption by the library market. Probably not. But the next one was, it's certainly an enormous area of popular culture, but personally, I'd have my doubts about its richness as a field of rigorous academic study. That is, apart from being an object of study and criticism in fields and journals that are already well represented. And then the last one was, I tend to feel that the occasional paper is all that the market would take at the moment. Well, that left us down, but as they say, not completely out. And our lovely, much missed colleague, Peter Gilbert, suggested that we approach a smaller independent publishing company where he knew the managing director. And Peter arranged for me to meet this gentleman actually in the coffee bar at Euston Station, of all the salubrious places. Now, I had no idea what this gentleman looked like, but as I walked into the coffee bar, my mobile rang, and at the other end was a voice saying, I've spotted you, you look just like your picture on the website. I'm over here, I'm waving a donut. Now that image, I'm forever going to associate with the journal. It will never leave my mind, of this gentleman in a crowded bar waving a donut as an introduction to possibly developing a spirituality journal. Things actually went really well after that meeting. The company agreed to publish the journal. We had a cover mocked up, and we actually had a small editorial board in place. Some of the people who agreed to that are still on the board today, so that's persistence for you. But just before the proposed launch, that company was bought by a much bigger one. It was a sort of hostile takeover, I think. And they decided that the journal wasn't a good fit for their profile. And so the whole project fell by the wayside again. It was revived by John Swinton, who introduced me to Janet Joyce, who is still the managing director of another then relatively new independent publishing company called Equinox. She liked the proposal and agreed almost immediately, surprisingly quickly, to publish the journal. But she suggested just calling it the Journal for the Study of Spirituality. So not only is that legacy still with us, but the three floating commas, as they've been referred to, which appear on the front and which are part of the then BAS and now INS logo, owe themselves to Janet's influence. Her decision was in 2010, just a few weeks before the first BAS conference was to take place. And we hastily produced flyers calling for papers, which we were able to distribute at the conference. We reactivated and extended the editorial board. And then the first issue actually went into production 10 months later. So it was incredibly quick from that first decision to actually bringing the first issue out. So that was so far so good. But within 2 years, that publisher merged with another company. It subsequently demerged, but JSS was among a group of journals for various reasons that remained with the second company. And it subsequently went through a very bleak period. I really thought that the end had come for the journal at that point. And then just when we were pretty despondent about the whole thing, the second company was acquired by Maney Publishing, again, an independent publisher, which was based in Leeds. And that was an excellent turn of events for JSS, and the relationship worked really well for some time. And then in 2015, Maney was bought by Taylor and Francis. And we were really lucky in that our managing editor moved with the journal to Taylor and Francis and saw it through its transition to what was its fourth publisher in its first 5 years. So you can imagine some of the upheavals that we went through in terms of changing systems, personnel, and so on. But that colleague is still with TNF, but she's changed her role within the company. But 6 years later, more than half of its time on this earth, JSS actually remains with Taylor and Francis. And it gives me some wry amusement sometimes to recall that TNF is one of the publishers that a decade ago, and I will whisper this very quietly, felt that the market wouldn't be able to sustain a journal like JSS and had doubts about the richness of spirituality studies as a field of rigorous academic study. At the launch of BAS in 2010, its then chair, John Swinton, said that the association was a product of multiple minds, much passion, and invaluable gifts of time. Well, so too is JSS. It simply wouldn't exist without the work of its contributors, its editorial board, its guest reviewers, and production team members, all past and present. And it's been my huge privilege to have worked alongside them all. And I think all of us here and the field of spirituality studies in general owe them a huge debt of gratitude. not least those colleagues who've been part of the INSS and JSS story from its inception. The range of studies covered in the journal since it began, as well as its international reach, have expanded considerably over the years, and I've detailed some of that in my editorial to 10.1, the anniversary issue. Our hope is, of course, that that will continue and that many of you here will contribute to it. However, I think many of us do still recognize the concern that was expressed by one of those early reviewers about the cross or interdisciplinary appeal of JSS. And in many ways, I think we've all recognized that this is both the greatest strength and probably the greatest weakness of the journal. And you're most welcome to join in our ongoing conversation about that. And I'd be interested to know what the journal means to you and what you want from it, perhaps starting in our conversation session tomorrow afternoon. Now, as I've said, JSS wouldn't exist at all without the hard work of its editorial board members. So I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves in a minute by telling us their name, institutional affiliation, and just very briefly their particular interest in the field of spirituality studies. And I'm going to begin with two of our three executive editors, Linda Ross and Wilf McSherry, who were both part of that group back in 2007, 2008, that helped to create BAS and put the proposal together for the journal. And I'll then move on to two other of our so-called named editors who look after our book reviews and social media, respectively. And then I'll call on other members of the editorial board to speak in alphabetical order as far as I can do that. So first of all, Wilf, I know you were part of the original interdisciplinary spirituality group at the University of Hull. So you were in this almost from before the beginnings, as it were. So could I invite you to speak now?
Yes, so thank you, Cheryl, and thank you for all your leadership of the journal. It wouldn't be in the position it is now without all of that. So,
thank you.
There's a lot of credit to be given to you in terms of that editor-in-chief. So I'm Wilf McSherry. I'm a professor in nursing, and as Cheryl said, I was originally at Hull University and one of the founding members for the, I think we called the International Spirituality Group or something. We called it, it was some title, and from that came the Centre for Spirituality Studies. So I think what's really humbling and reassuring is, for me, spirituality is about relationship and connections. And from those initial meetings and the evolution of INSS, many of that founding group and all those original contacts and relationships that were made then are still here present today. And that's really, I think that says something about the power of spirituality and people's passion and enthusiasm for the study. And that's done it across a number of levels. So it's a real pleasure. And I work now at Staffordshire University. I also have a secondment with the University Hospitals of North Midlands and an appointment with VID, specialised university in Bergen and Oslo in Norway. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Wilf. Linda, are you out there somewhere?
Yes, I'm here, Cheryl. Nice to see you all. I'm Linda Ross. I'm Professor of Nursing at the University of South Wales in Wales, although I'm originally from Scotland. And my area, I became interested in this whole topic as an 18-year-old care assistant, where I could see the difference that spirituality and spiritual care made to the care of some of the patients I was looking after. So that became my key question. This seems to be an important area, but it seems to be a neglected dimension of nursing care. So that really was the trigger for me and my journey. I went on to do my PhD in this and did the first study in Europe looking at what nurses think spirituality and spiritual care is. And that's led me on to two key things I've been really interested in, is how do we incorporate spiritual care within our nursing practice? So much of my research has been around that, particularly in heart failure. Then the other question I've had is, how do we actually educate our nurses and midwives? And that's been a whole programme of research over the last 15 years as well. And we're going to be speaking about some of that work in our presentation tomorrow. Wilf, myself, and a group from across Europe have conducted some research in that field. And as Cheryl says, I'm one of the ones that were in there from the start. And I also chair the Spirituality, Health and Wellbeing group in Wales, which advises Welsh Government on matters to do with spirituality and also holds them to account for that within healthcare policy and practice in Wales. And I would echo Wilf's, what he's said about Cheryl really has been the one who's made all this happen and so successful. So thank you, Cheryl.
Well, thank you. But one of the things about Zoom is that you can switch yourself off. So I shall do that if anybody else says anything, because this is a joint enterprise. But I'm now going to, Robin, are you out there somewhere? Have you come up from down under?
Yes, I'm here. I know that the image of waving a donut is going to stay with me for a long time, Cheryl. So thank you for that image at the beginning of this journey. And I've got to applaud Cheryl's wonderful leadership as well. She is incredibly patient and incredibly good with words. So there you have it, Cheryl. So my interests are historic Christian mysticism. I've been doing a lot of work over the last few years on Evelyn Underhill, who those of you in the UK will know about her, hopefully. We're just coming up to the 80th anniversary of her death. And the other area that I'm interested in is aging and spirituality. So particularly spiritual care for people with dementia, which is really an area that I got interested in when my own mother had dementia and passed away a couple of years ago. And I'm also a spiritual director and I lead retreats in Australia and the UK. And I'm dying to get back over to Europe and the UK. It felt like a long time to be in lockdown here in Australia. And I think there's quite a few months still to go before we're allowed out. So it's wonderful to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. I'm not sure whether you actually mentioned that you are a book reviews editor, which is
yes,
an important role. So Robin is the person to talk to if you have any ideas for book reviews. Don't just send them in, talk to her first. I'm going to move on quickly because we do need to finish by 1 o'clock and there's lots of people to introduce. But the next one is Sophie McKenzie, who's our social media editor.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you this morning. Yes, I am. Which means that I control our Twitter feed. Sorry, I hope you can hear me. But I control our Twitter handle, and I put it in the chat. It's at JSS Spirituality. You use that handle if you tweet. And my background is in working with people with communication, therapist by background.
Sorry, you're being interrupted. I'm missing out on parts of what you're saying.
I know my internet is bad. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about it. Sorry.
Don't worry, you've got the main things over, Sophie, particularly about the Twitter handle. So thank you very much for that. And I'm going to move quickly on to all the other members of the editorial board that I think are here. I can't quite see them all. But if I could ask you just to say who you are and your institutional affiliation, and just very briefly, in sort of 1 minute, no more, who you are. I'm going to turn to Carl Becker first.
Thank you, Cheryl. It's wonderful to see Cheryl and David and Wilf and Linda and so many old friends from Ravenscar days and earlier. We've had a few of you over to Japan. I would love to continue that if COVID lets us. For the last 40 years, I've worked on terminal care, death, and dying. About 10 years ago, my focus switched to burning out nurses. And I've spoken about my work with nurse burnout at earlier past meetings. And this year, I published a book on Japanese spirituality, which Wilf kindly wrote a lovely blurb, which the publisher cut down to 1 line. But you'll receive that in a few weeks, Wilf. It'll be in your mail. I think that's enough from me. I've been in Japan for the last 40 years, and we'll be here if you come visit.
We may have lost Cheryl, have we?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I've just come in, so as another member of the board to keep it going. Michael O'Sullivan, I'm the director of the Spirituality Institute for Research and Education in Dublin, Ireland. I've been for the last 16 years the director of an MA program in applied spirituality. I'm also a research fellow in the University of the Free State of South Africa. And I was involved in what was then British Association for the Study of Spirituality, BAT, from its launch event onwards. And now I'm also on this on INSS, and we'll have that discussion this afternoon, but also on the editorial board of JSS. My interest in spirituality, I suppose I'm pioneering authentic subjectivity as a framework for the study of spirituality. And I also am interested in spirituality and social concern, spiritual capital, and spirituality in childhood. Okay.
Okay, I'm one of the newbies. I'm a medical doctor and professor of quality of life, spirituality, and coping at a university in Wittenherdecke. No one knows, it's somewhere in Germany. And also associated as a research professor at a competence center for Christian spirituality in Münster. So research interests are spirituality as a resource to cope for patients, for example, support of spiritual needs in people with stressful life situations, spiritual dryness as a form of spiritual crisis, and finally, questionnaire design. So this book is quite new, and Will and Linda were involved. It came the weekend, so I'm quite happy to show it. And I'm now ready with my presentation.
And it's being reviewed in the next edition of
Thank you.
JS.
Well, I may as well jump in next then. I'm one of the oldies. I, like Michael, have been around since the launch event in some form or another. And like Robin, the heart of my interest has been around dementia and spirituality. I started off as a theologian and then sort of migrated across, but have also published in the journal through the years on the evolution of religious sensibilities and how that affects our understanding of the theory of spirituality, and stuff around autism spectrum conditions. And I think one of the things that the journal has worked really well at doing is being the sort of journal where you can try out all sorts of ideas that wouldn't fit anywhere else to a high academic standard. So so I think it would be fair to say that the journal didn't just reflect the market in ideas on spirituality, but actually created it to a large extent as well. These days, I'm Professor of Values in Health and Social Care at Staffordshire University, and my own interests have migrated more towards ageing and social care policy in the UK and also in Brazil at the moment, where I'm doing a bit of work.
Hello, can I just say, I don't know where I went, but my internet connection just disappeared and I've just come back, so thank you for carrying on. Have we still got some more board members to introduce themselves? How far have we got?
I'll perhaps jump in. Kia ora from New Zealand. My name is David Crawley. I lecture in spirituality at Laidlaw College here in Auckland, New Zealand. My interests are in spiritual direction, which is a practice that I have, like Robin, and my thinking and my research seems to gravitate to areas of power and power relationships, and especially to narrative approaches to spiritual care of all kinds. It's been a wonderful discovery to find JSS and INSS and to have some conversation partners who are thin on the ground in my part of the world.
Well, perhaps I'll jump in next since I'm also from that part of the world. Fiona Gardner, or close. I'm from Australia and I work at a place called Bendigo, which is 2 hours north of Melbourne at La Trobe University, teaching in social work. But I also teach at the University of Divinity in critical spirituality for people who are interested in being supervisors in pastoral care or chaplaincy or spiritual direction, or, you know, similar kinds of roles. Like Linda, I got interested in this because I became conscious of how in social work it is absolutely forbidden really to talk about, or it has been, to talk about spirituality and religion. And I think that is gradually starting to change. So my interests are critical spirituality and how that connects to being critically reflective, how to include the spiritual and religious in social work practice and thinking, and to some extent thinking about and working with spirituality and palliative care. And it's been a wonderful thing to find the journal and Cheryl, and I so enjoyed coming to the conference last time and hope that I will manage to get to it physically another time.
Julian, Julian, do you want to come in?
Hello, I just worked out how to raise my hand. Thank you, Cheryl. Yes, I've been on the board for a long time now. I've already explained this morning my long-term interest in spirituality and my parallel, sometimes I feel disloyal, interest in religious education. I'm sitting on both sides of the fence, I believe. And I'm editor of the British Journal of Religious Education and General Secretary of the International Seminar on Religious Education and Values. And for the last decade, the third leg of a three-legged stool is my work on solitude, silence and loneliness. And we set up last year, mid-pandemic, the International Society for Research on Solitude, which of course has links with both religious issues and spiritual issues and spirituality. So I'm delighted to have been for many years working with Cheryl and with the journal. Long may it last. Interdisciplinarity is only interdisciplinarity until it becomes a discipline. And I know that with solitude studies that, you know, that may become a discipline. 1964, education became a discipline when a group of professors got together, also in Hull, like the spirituality meetings, got together in Hull and decided what education studies as an academic discipline would be. Disciplines are created, and Cheryl, I think you've helped create a new one.
Well, thank you very much. I'd always thought of Hull as the end of the universe, but it sounds like it might be the beginning of it. Thank you for that, Julian. I'm not sure what happened whilst I had disappeared, but Stefania, are you out there? Would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, I am. Thank you. I'm Stefania Palmisano. I'm associate professor in the sociology of religion at the University of Turin, Italy. And I teach the sociology of religion and the sociology of spirituality, alternative spiritualities. I was a visiting research fellow in the Department of Politics, Philosophy and Religion at University of Lancaster. And now I work in Turin, and I'm also the coordinator of the research center CRAFT, which means Contemporary Religions and Faith in Transition. And my research consists of ethnographic studies of contemporary religious experience in mainstream religions, but also in new religious movements and alternative spiritualities. And my new book is this one. Is Contemporary Spiritualities, Enchanted Words of Nature, Well-Being and Mystery in Italy. And at the moment, I'm working on the relationship between religion, spirituality, and health in hospital healthcare in Italy. Thank you very much for being aboard.
Thank you, Stefania. Stefania is one of our newer members. It's delighted to have you here. And I can see one of our I won't say older, but certainly one of our founding editors out there, David Lorimer. Would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you. I thought I've got to get myself in the queue by putting my hand up like that. I'm speaking actually from Holland. I'm on the road. My with my wife, so I'm not in my normal habitat. So my name's David Lorimer. I'm the program director of the Scientific and Medical Network, and I've been editor of Paradigm Explorer, which is the journal of the Scientific and Medical Network since 1986, so 35 years. And more recently, I'm also chairman of the Galileo Commission. And those of you online who are not yet familiar with the Galileo Commission, and I've written an article about it in the journal, I encourage you to go to galileocommission.org and sign up to support the movement towards post-materialist science of consciousness by either becoming a friend or a professional affiliate. We now have 400 advisors and professional affiliates of the academic status, and so where we are growing the movement. My interests started in near-death experiences, and I've written a number of books connected with death and survival. I think my current interest is more in gnosis and the implications of an experience of gnosis as oneness, particularly in relation to light and love, which seem to me the core experience, and then the ethical implications of that, which I think are profound. We're working to reinstate gnosis as a higher form of knowing, as opposed to it being dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I can see Leona and Regenia out there. So can we go to Leona first, who's also one of the founding members of the editorial board. And I think you were probably at that 2007 conference with Peter Jarvis as well, Leona. Can I ask you to unmute yourself and come in?
Sure. I'm Leona English. I'm a professor of adult education in Nova Scotia, Canada. And I've known Cheryl for quite some time. I think I met Cheryl in 2000 in Vancouver, where we found out that we were people in adult education who had this interest. And I will tell you that you're the equivalent of a pariah in adult education, having this interest. And if you add religious education to it, as I do, you're definitely on the outs. So I've been on the outs with Cheryl for quite some time. My own interests, as I said, are in spirituality of adult education and gender. And at this conference, I'll do a presentation on some current work looking at the social gospel spirituality in Canadian adult educators. So I combine multiple interests, and I'm an intersectional person, I guess. So glad to be here and delighted to be part of this journal. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Leona. And Regenia, I'm pleased to see you here. I thought it was probably the middle of your night, so I was looking forward to meeting you tomorrow afternoon, but delighted to do so now. Would you like to introduce yourself? Regenia has recently joined the board, and I'm very pleased with what she brings to it. Thank you. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Regina Williams, and I bring you greetings from Cleveland, Ohio, on America's North Coast. It's almost 8:00 a.m. here, so yeah, I didn't have to get up too early, but I'm so grateful to Dr. Hunt for the opportunity to work with this group of scholars that's associated with the journal and the International Network for the Study of Spirituality. It's really exciting. Looking forward to our presentation tomorrow. I am the founder and the editor-in-chief for the journal of the Traditions and Beliefs, and the founder of the Center for the Study of Religion and Spirituality in the History of Africa and the Diaspora. And we call it the Rashad Center for short. Someone mentioned the University of the Free State. I'm going to email Dr. Sullivan because that's the last place I was when I had a chance to do research internationally in Kwakwa, South Africa. So I'm happy to be here. I work also with the Cleveland History Center, which is the headquarters for the Western Reserve Historical Society here in Cleveland, Ohio. So thank you so much for the opportunity to say hello to all of you.
Thank you, Regina. I'm not sure who spoke while I was out in the twilight zone. Is Suman here, and have you introduced yourself? Suman Ing?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks, Cheryl. This is Silman. I'm a professor at the University of Hong Kong. It's now 8 o'clock in the evening here. My professional background is in mental health, social work, and Chinese medicine. And my research focus is on mental disorders and culture. And regarding spirituality, I have worked on enlightenment experience, daily spiritual experience. And currently, I'm doing a randomized control trial on mindfulness practice for pregnant women during the prenatal and postnatal period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suman. Oliver, are you here and have you introduced yourself? Oliver Robinson?
Hi, Cheryl. No, I haven't, so I'll do so briefly. Hello, everybody. My name's Oliver Robinson, and I'm an associate professor of psychology at the University of Greenwich. I write on the relationship between science and spirituality, and also research the role of spirituality in healthy adult development. And I'll be doing a keynote today at 4 p.m. UK time, discussing the dialectical model I've developed on the relationship of science to spirituality, taking a historical perspective to a large degree. And I also co-organize the Beyond the Brain conference with David Lorimer, who you just heard from. Yeah, I recently arrived on the board. It's great to be part of JSS and wonderful to be part of the conference today. So look forward to seeing you later.
Thank you very much, Oliver, and we look forward to that too. Michael, have you introduced yourself? Michael?
I did actually, I did, Cheryl, but let me just add, I've enjoyed very much working with you now over the years in First Bass and now INSS and the journal. So thank you for all you've been doing. I want to really support what others have said regarding what you've been doing. Great contribution. Thank you.
Are there any other members of our editorial board out there that haven't spoken? Please wave your hand or shout or something. I think that may well be everybody. I can't see anybody else. Okay, so, well, thank you very much to all of you, both for your input today. And I'm sorry to have missed some of it. I shall look forward to seeing the recording to see those of you I missed. And thank you also for your ongoing work for the journal. It really is very much appreciated. Now, before I hand over, and I think we're almost exactly dead on time, which is quite miraculous. Before I hand over to David, can I ask you all to join me in a toast in whatever form you feel appropriate to the Journal for the Study of Spirituality, all who contribute to it, and to its successful journey into the future. And I think at this point, I might actually be allowed just to say cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Over to you, David.